Frank Rodriguez. Now he's the owner and lead creative director at Mighty Fine Design Co., a branding and advertising agency that helps define brands and their messaging. Frank, we got to know each other a little bit before we hit record today, and I'm pretty excited about this conversation, man. So first of all, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, weather's just changed here in Florida, so the oppressive heat is gone, and and the cool is on.
Hey, that rhymed on time. No,
Yeah.
no. Okay, so you're cooler than me. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I normally don't rhyme like that, but I'm a little nervous, so maybe a few cliches here and there might work out for this.
Right on, man. So listen, you were telling me about what it was like growing up out there in Miami and Florida. I mean, sorry, I don't know why that happens to me synonymously, but in Florida and overall, the lifestyle is something that I can relate to a lot in terms of my own growing up and having to work hard to get even the smallest things that other kids had and things of that nature, and being able to look up to your family, your elders, like grandma, and the kind of class they had. So I got to ask, do you, based on what you told me, I think I have an answer, but I'd rather not put words in your mouth. So did you come from a family of entrepreneurs?
I did not come from a family of entrepreneurs. I was the only one in my immediate family that went to college. My dad's side of the family, they came here from Colombia, but my grandmother was an entrepreneur. She had a dress shop in Miami, and I remember going there and seeing the ladies come and go, and always liked hanging out there, because she was the most important person in my life. So, yeah, she was one of the only entrepreneur in my family.
That's cool though, because I'm sure that had a big influence on the way you saw things. But work ethic, just based on what you told me from your story, is something that seems to come with the territory for the hand you were dealt in life, right? And that's something that I'm not a stranger of, or any entrepreneur that's ever come across this show. That work ethic was just part of the course. This is what's going to go down. So we got to the place of high school and how all of a sudden all the things you worked really hard to get to were now in fashion. Like you were trying to get away from thrift clothes and this and that, and all of a sudden they came into fashion or this or that. But at what point did you decide for yourself that you were going to go into business? Because I'm sure at some point it became really clear to you, yeah, this is how I'm going to live my life.
That's a good question. I guess one of the first things that I would mention is going to college. I really didn't have any aspirations to do that. And luckily, I had a friend one day, we're working on wrenching on a truck, and he's like, "Oh, go sign up," and kind of pushed me to do that. And when I got to school, my secondary school, because I didn't take, my prior education too seriously, it started to broaden my horizons and kind of open up the world to me, and open up that idea of curiosity, especially being in an art program, being around peers that I found to be interesting. It's kind of funny because you hear sometimes a lot of these Silicon Valley folks, saying you don't need, to go to college to make it in the world, and I absolutely needed it. I wouldn't be here today without it. And the courses that I studied kind of trained me to be who I am today. But the impetus really for starting my own business was working at a place that I did pretty well at. But the culture it just didn't fit my lifestyle or what I thought, a company culture should be like. So I decided to be my own boss and start a business so that I could develop that culture and maintain it, until they put me in the box, basically. I always knew I was going to play the long game. And that's an important aspect of what I do is making sure that, that I create an environment for myself and for the people that work for me to be happy, creative, and not to be cliche. I really, hold that true.
I like that because it's in the spirit of entrepreneurship. You saw something that didn't exist, at least not where you were, and you said, well, then it's time for me to build it. Because most people go, someone should do that. I am someone. That's exactly what you said. And you took the call, you answered the call, and you built this. And I'm assuming this was Mighty Fine Design that you built with this culture in mind. Is that correct?
Well, no,
Right.
I first did production, which, you know, coming from a photography background, it was a natural transition into producing videos,
Yeah.
corporate, whatnot, animation. And, I did that for 10 years. And I realized as I was doing it, these companies would contact me for a slick video. And I noticed that, their website or some of their other collateral was lacking, and overall brand awareness was lacking. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you making this video? Because you don't really have the framework to support this. You're going to spend all of this money, and you have something that looks like it was made from 1991. So I think, not I think, but I've always had the idea of an agency, to create an agency so that we could do everything that would help somebody create a brand. And from the identity to website, to marketing, to to advertising, motion graphics, just making sure that we could deliver content to folks that would give them the confidence, and align with their brand.
I like that. So you were in this production and then this production field and then founded Mighty Fine Design. I want to make sure I understand that clearly, how that transition happened from you left the place that did not have a culture you appreciated. They were great. You were doing great, but it wasn't, you knew it wasn't where you were going to end up. So you went out and sought to develop that for yourself. And along the way, you fell into production and then launched Mighty Fine Design. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct. And I will say that first job really gave me some skills, some, kind of boosted my business acumen.
Yeah.
But the production, which we're still doing to this day,
Really
it's
awesome.
yeah, it hasn't faded out. It's just now that we have two identities on the web. One is Mighty Fine Design, and the other one is Mighty Fine Production. But it's really the agency that I focus on most, because I think that's what is most helpful to folks.
Right.
Yeah, to be able to provide solutions to their problems. And I think that's what design is and production is all about, really.
And this is the perfect opportunity to dive into that, because a lot of entrepreneurs in today's world are online and they're thinking to themselves, oh, I've got to have a personal brand. But you're right. They'll go out and buy all these videos with everything else in their entire asset library, their entire digital presence isn't up to par. Video is like the last step in the equation before you get to tactics or whatever else, right? So in your perspective, what are some things that, or what order should someone consider the development of a brand, a personal brand?
Definitely starting with brand identity and messaging, and establishing the rules that everybody needs to abide by when using, a logo or the messaging that is created by creating branding guidelines. And you can also incorporate into those branding guidelines some style guides that direct people. So if you have a larger organization, or excuse me, if you are sending creative out to be produced, you have those guidelines in place so that somebody can't go off brand. Continuity is key. So we've seen it before, where really large organizations don't have those things in place, and you need that playbook to get things started. And the other thing, and this might sound obvious, but I don't think people put enough effort into it, and that's creating quality assets. So whether it's your photography, your videos, your animation, the logo itself, which is very important because that really kind of drives everything. I think that sometimes people haphazardly start to build a brand. They'll have an idea, but they forget about the creative and the identity.
100%, 100%. I've always likened it, and I don't know if you can correct me if I'm wrong here. I'd love to test this against your metal. That how a comedian works out material, let's say from club to club, but that's not their end material. That's not their content. That's them brainstorming an identity, if you will, and then they finally have a bit that's good that they can use to build upon different jokes, different assets, and start to build all that. And I imagine that's a metaphor for how I imagine building a personal brand is once you have the key guidelines, it's sort of like when kids used to outline with a crayon on a drawing and then fill it in to avoid drawing past the lines or something along those lines. Is that sort of the way messaging and having strict guidelines for assets helps develop a personal brand?
Indeed. And I love the comedian analogy, because when we're developing a brand identity, we're hand sketching first and going through multiple iterations and then taking those ideas. Well, let me start a little before that.
Okay.
First, we're word mapping, getting a lot of feedback from our clients, putting all those words on page and then filtering those ideas into sketches, and then from sketches, into the digital realm, and then, iterating from there. So it's a highly iterative process, and where we cover everything so that we're making sure that we're looking at the competition, because we don't want any overlap with that. We don't want any brand confusion. And indeed, like you said, all the comedians are trying out their stuff. We're trying all of that out before our client hits the national stage, right? And so that they can come out and have a sense of confidence within their organization to go out and deliver that first, not the first step, but your first encounter with them. Yeah.
Yeah. And now, do you recall the first time you fleshed out a personal brand for someone? Like you launched the agency, you're like, look, this is what we do, and then were all the systems and processes in place, or you had it all in here, and over time it sort of eventually built out? Was it rough to get started, or you had it all planned out because that's just the way you roll?
Now, you mean the agency or working with a client?
Working with a client, yeah.
Well, it's a fun process. One of the things you learn as an entrepreneur, or as you go through life and work, is that one of the things that becomes clear with age and time is wisdom. So you start to better communicate with folks, rather than that first reaction and kind of push back on them. Be pleasant and also complimentary of what they're saying, and bring that information in so that you can inform yourself better of what they need. But yeah, so this has happened it actually happens all the time with branding. It's that you go through a process and you sort of get this looks good, I'm not sure. And then like this latest one that we worked on, that was the email I got. This looks good, but I'm just not quite sure.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, he's like, I'm stoked. I'm putting this, well, I'm using my own words here. I'm putting this on my hats, my truck. Everybody loves it. We have, and I could tell he had a renewed sense of optimism, for his brand, and a renewed sense of confidence as well. And that's happened a few times. I think good design is just a secret weapon that, kind of gets overlooked, because, good design is invisible.
100%. And you're right. The ROI is so hard for, especially someone who's never done it before. It's not like they're like, oh, we have a new project and we want to get a personal brand going for that. They're like, no, this is me. I want to, what does this look like? They have a hard time up until the very end of it all, understanding how is this ROI at all? Like, how is all of this actually returning value? Well, it's because before this, everything was scattered. Nothing was connected. Nothing was synthesized. You could see all the seams. We made it seamless by working with you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 100%. We're making it seamless. We're bringing continuity into their marketing and into, who they are. And also, with continuity, with all of everything that we're talking about, it builds trust with the consumer, right? So it may not be a conscious, but it's subconscious, really, because we've all seen collateral from Mercedes, or I like to use the analogy of like, okay, so there's the Courtyard Marriott and then there's the Ritz-Carlton. You expect two different experiences when you go into each. The first one's not bad, but the other one, you really have an expectation for. And so that's what we're trying to do, not necessarily, I guess in other words, is trying to make that experience so that when the end user sees it, it's flawless, establishes trust, empathy, and overall a good user experience. And so, whether it's web design or a slick ad, or a billboard, that user experience, that design informs the client that you put some time into what you were doing, not necessarily me, but the client and the person that's looking for their, looking to the client for their business.
Yeah, there's definitely almost like it
Did that
sounds
make
like,
sense?
yes, it seems
Okay.
almost like there's a process of developing a sense for how high a bar can be set for the type of work and the message that you're putting out into the world. And we know what the highest bars are, and we're just trying to figure out where it is that you are with your messaging and all of that. And that's something that an external party needs to manage, at least in the beginning, until you get all the guidelines together. Because you could try to have your team do it, but most people in a company are so close to the work itself that they can't see the label on the jar. And that's why I've always believed, just personally, I'm fascinated by personal branding. That personally, I believe that when anyone does it right, you're right, it's almost invisible. Like it almost seems like no work happened, but a lot of work happened. And some of the most complicated things shown in simplicity is masterful, as they say. And so it's really artistic, but yet data driven to develop a personal brand, from what I'm gathering based on some of my own things, but also from the story that you're telling and the work that you've done. And so for me, the part of the reason why I go so deep on this is that a lot of people right now are used to seeing someone like, let's say, Gary V, and he says, just document. And he goes out and he says, just hit record. And people mistake him saying that that's content. It's not. You get to now have a library that you can review, develop, and pull data from and determine what you're going to do with and develop content from that. But then that has to go through a filter of guidelines, principles, and messaging that you yourself have developed with your team or contractors or companies that you brought together, right? So that expectation can be skewed from these sound bites on social media, and everybody wants a slice of the pie, and everybody can have their slice of the pie, but they're going to need professionals who can help them communicate that. Just like even Tiger Woods needed a coach to get better at things, right? The raw talent, your message could be incredible. Your product service can be incredible. Let's help you put that in a package that's even more potent. And that's what I believe personal branding is. And what I'm understanding from all the things you're saying that you're trying to help people accomplish. And then you can start, that's why you have the other company, to do production of videos and such, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all a supportive role. And I love that Gary Vee, because a lot of influencers say, just do it, right? And I mean, it's hard. And if you are just going to do it, make sure you have some money to do it right. Um, and yeah, we're here to champion people's brands. And sometimes, this profession, when you do a design, the individual may bring his or her own history in and say, hey, well, why don't you try this green? It's like, we've probably already done that. So it's like getting past that point. But indeed, what you're saying is like, yes, getting that foundation in place, right? So you have to frame a house before you put the, drywall in and the plumbing and then finish it off with furniture. And that's I think what you're saying and I'm saying is that, yeah, that branding portion of it is important, but also making sure, the design aspect of it moving forward is in line with everything, and also making sure that I'm having a making sure everything's tied in. So even with the video, right? Like all of those
Absolutely.
things. And the great thing about I got a little tied up there, but the good thing about creating those assets at the beginning too, the photography, the ad copy, the ad designs, is that those items can be leveraged across multiple channels. So it may cost a little bit more, but you can use that photography on just about anything. So you can pull a lot of mileage out of it. And I think folks don't realize that, the ROI, as you were saying, like it may not be quantifiable at first, but if you think about it in the long run, because we've done this a few times where photography, we've seen it in multiple places, and it's like, oh, you got way more value out of that than what you put into it. And I don't mean to be discounting the client for what they paid, because we love doing work, putting it out, and if they make $1 million off of something that we've done, great. Then
That's
we've
the
done our
reason,
job.
right? That's the
Yeah,
purpose. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
No, I love that. And then there's the idea of how do you as an agency manage when people who jump on board, they get disheartened when all of a sudden they know that they want to do this, but it's more of a want than a must. And that creates friction in the end deliverable of a product. Because I imagine there's a lot of industries that I've had the chance to talk to, but no other industry other than the one that you're in is where like a partnership is truly important to be able to tap into the truth of the design, the messaging with the person who you're working with, the client. That partnership is important for them to return things on time. It's a lot like when you're building a logo for someone or something, right? It's like, oh, well, we think it's this, but then it turns into this back and forth, and communication can be an issue. How do you determine yourself as an agency whether this is a must for someone or a sort of it would be nice?
Well, that's a good question. In what I do is take an overall look at the brand, and determine, because I'll rewind a little bit. I remember talking to somebody about video one day, and I told that person, I said, you don't need a video, you need a website. And that's before I was even doing branding, and I lost a job. Sometimes I'm a little frank, no pun intended, but it's a balance. So I would never deliver something that somebody doesn't need. At the end of the day, I think it's really a fine balance when you're communicating to people, whether it's what they need or don't need, or when you're delivering something. It goes back to that idea of your history and talking with people and educating them on what you're doing and why you're doing it. And ultimately, again, not to be redundant, but we're only here to be championing your brand, because at the end of the day, I'm doing this so that I can have fun on the weekends. When they put me in the box, I doubt they're going to talk about the campaigns that I ran. And that same thing applies for the people that work with me. It's like we love what we do. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Like I'm stoked to be an agency and be working with people on a creative level. But I also know that my life outside of work is more important.
That's such a good balance to have as an entrepreneur, because it can often be the opposite, where people fall into like work is everywhere all the time, no matter what. And I don't know if that's related to levels of ambition or lack of understanding how to place boundaries. How do you as an entrepreneur sort of get that balance together? Is it you just understand your values and what you want in a life so clearly? Or did you have to develop that practice?
I developed that practice over time, but I always knew that I needed a certain amount of downtime. And I know, especially in any industry, you can only sit in front of a computer for so long and expect a level of performance, right? So, sometimes if we're slow, or whatever, I'll stagger and give people a day off, or, for me, I'll take a ride day because I love mountain biking. So if my schedule is freed up, I'll just kind of take off for an afternoon. And I came to the conclusion, like, of the business supports me. I'll never let it get to the point where the business is running me. I need to run the business.
Yeah, no, it's an important place to be, especially when you're doing a service type of business, because that can become time consuming depending on the scalability that you've been able to put in place, right? Because if it's just you, let's say when you were starting out, I imagine work took up a lot more time than maybe when you brought on a team.
Indeed. And also, the other thing is you just get better at what you do, right? So what took 3 hours now takes an hour because you have so many, influences and history and projects that you've done, that timeline or that process workflow becomes more condensed and easier to put in play.
I really like this conversation because it's run the gamut of not only understanding where personal branding fits in the scheme of someone's asset development. We didn't even cover advertising and what you think about campaigns, right? It's just branding alone and how important that is. Knowing that that also informs the type of campaigns you run, not just the videos you'll make later. There's so much work that goes into this fundamental practice that then we look at, okay, so you're running this, but then you also tapped into the idea of how an entrepreneur should have some balance in life and how you yourself have found that there's a passion outside of work. It's not that you don't love what you do. You love what you do. You couldn't even imagine doing something else. And then at the same time, you also make room for things that you care about outside of work. And what a refresher to hear, because there are a lot of people who really are like, hey, 16 hours, if that's what's necessary, I'll do that all day. And you're right. You can only get diminishing returns. It's a real thing. And especially in a technology driven age. So these reminders are really important for people who are listening or for people who are thinking they would like to become an entrepreneur, because these are realities, and being able to give a different flavor, especially, see, I'm talking to Frank Rodriguez, a Latino entrepreneur, like that's another aspect of it, because I want to say it's the same across the board, but it's not. There's this difference that we are the same. We're delivering the same quality work, right? Whatever it's going to be. But that's not always how people may end up seeing it. So I'm wondering, did you have any, maybe it's because maybe you were in Florida and the culture is a little different out there. Maybe it's a melting pot, as you said earlier before we hit record. But I know like in a lot of places like LA, it's not always the case. And you have to work a little harder to even try to get a client. New York's more culturally open, more than LA, and it's just a fact. And you can imagine anywhere else across the nation. And this is just in this country alone, right? So, did you have any roadblocks, or did you always just see yourself differently and never faced or gave into this idea that there was going to be that kind of restriction?
I never thought there were any barriers in place. I mean, the only barrier I had in place was, I always say to people, the only person that's going to take me down is myself. So, yeah, the cultural thing never came up. At least, I've never experienced it face to face, because I don't think people have the nerve to do that. But back to the cultural heritage about this too is that I think it played and informed a large part of what I do and who I am, for sure. Going back to my grandmother, she taught me what it was like to be a good person. She taught me what it was like, to be respected and to have integrity and have just a great disposition. And it's kind of a flashpoint for me now. And I don't know if this is a good thing to bring up, but we people are talking about this all the time. And my grandmother didn't speak English until the day she died, because she lived in Miami and didn't need to. And she, I think she influenced a lot of people. Sorry, that was a little bit of a digression.
No, I love that because it
Okay.
was important, because she was an entrepreneur.
She
She had her
wasn't.
own shop, you know? And
Yeah.
yet, like you said, she was able to influence people, impacted society. Anyone who owns a business contributes value to society quite directly. There's no other way to say it, right? If they're in business long enough, you're contributing value to society. Society is saying, yes, take this in exchange for that. So it is a powerful place to come from. And that's why I sort of asked you earlier if you had ever come across it. And I'm glad to hear that the answer was no. And that's because I don't get that sense at all from you. It just seems like any door can be open. And for me, that kind of conversation is important, because whenever I look at media, all I ever tend to see, and this is important, because if entrepreneurship and business is going to be the conversation at hand, I want people to know that everyone from any walk of life, regardless of anything. And it's as cliche as it sounds, but it's true. We're all capable of this. If a human did it, it is capable by another human. All things, physical necessities withstanding, like sports needs, maybe taller or bulkier or whatever, what have you. But for the most part, anyone can be almost anything they want to be in life. And having good examples, having no self-limiting beliefs can create an opportunity where now you have two companies, one for production and then an agency that focuses on helping other entrepreneurs succeed with their businesses. How cool is that? You get to sit in and help take whatever someone did further, sharper, clearer. And that's value contribution. Yet again, entrepreneurship. And it always comes back to this fundamental. And that's why I brought up the whole thing about being Latino. And I'm so glad you brought up the thing about your grandma, because yeah, it doesn't matter where you come from. Can you work hard? Do you have great ideas? Do you have a vision? Then you're an entrepreneur as long as you're executing. Man,
Right.
go ahead. No,
Yeah.
I'm just happy to be here with you.
As long as, yeah, I think, as long as you have the vision, some grit. And also, I think what a lot of people tend to forget is that how, I'm lucky that, I had that person and a few other people, like a professor in my life, because I studied art in Paris for a summer. His name was Lou Marcus, and he taught me how to see. My grandmother taught me what entrepreneurship was like, and I'm lucky that I've had exposure to certain people. I've done most everything on my own, but those influences definitely, steered me and created a path, a destiny. And I think a lot of folks don't have that, and when somebody does something altruistic, I read the bio on Metal, how he's helping folks, who are coming out of prison and doing that. It's like, being a mentor like that is amazing. And I think entrepreneurs like us, we've been lucky in that, those people have fell into place at some point in our lives, that have guided us and taught us.
Conversations like this that help me remember sort of this idea of like teaching and being taught, or influencing and being influenced in the right proportions, in the right degrees, by the right people, are really what make the world go around beyond anything, right? Because you're right, I have so many people I can point to that I wouldn't be right here if it wasn't for them, and not everybody has that. And it's just a great reminder. I'm sure every entrepreneur, because after a certain point, you can only grow by helping others grow, right? Every mentor I've ever had says that's the reason they're even helping me. Is it just there's just no other way a person can grow after a certain point. There's only so much money that you can get before it doesn't add happiness to your life, and there's only so much growth you can do on your own until you start helping others grow. And every entrepreneur that knows this right now and is listening, I'm 100% sure they're about to pick up the phone and call their mentee or whatever it is, or their mentor, and just get back into this. And that's the kind of inspiration we needed today, especially with everything that's going on. So Frank, I want to roll out the red carpet for you and allow people to know, where can they connect with you? What should they go look at? Any calls to action? The floor is yours.
Yeah, so they can visit us on the web at mightyfinedesign.co. There you can find, case studies, work. We're always looking to help, new businesses elevate their brands, existing businesses reestablish or rebrand themselves. Whether it's visual identity or messaging. That's the stuff that we get excited about, is being able to take somebody, like this, the seed, let it germinate and grow. That's what we're
Awesome.
going to do.
So
I didn't really end that too eloquently.
No,
So.
you're fine. Sorry. Maybe it's just been an awesome conversation. I mean, it ran all across the board, and it's not always that way,
Okay.
But mightyfinedesign.co, you said it was?
mightyfinedesign.co.
And then, are you active on any social channels or anything like that?
Yeah, we're active on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Nice. Okay. I think I have some information here. It looks like the Instagram one is Mighty Fine Design.
Yeah.
And Twitter is Mighty Design Co.
Instagram is Mighty Fine Design, and Twitter is, you're going to be editing this, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Mighty Design Co. Correct.
Got it. So now that we're reaching the end of this, I'd like to roll out the red carpet for you and allow anyone who's listening to know where they can connect with you specifically. Any calls to action that are open for you. Where do you want them to go, Frank?
Um, well, I think the website is a good place to connect with us. They could call us directly at 813-343-3770, or through any social media channels. Really, just we're happy to connect and make that experience pleasant for them, from the time of our first chat to the time we wrap up.
Nice. And there's a question I've been wanting to ask you, and I mentioned it earlier, that I ask everybody who's stopped by. And I hope you'll indulge me, but you're also welcome to pass. You can be the rebel. You can be the first if you want.
Okay.
And that is, if you could have invited anybody to sit here with us and join in on this conversation, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Well, I think the first person that comes to mind would be Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay.
Yeah.
Just because I thought he was an amazing orator, and just from my standpoint, one of the greatest sports legends of all times. And he was controversial and of his time, and willing to give up his career for his beliefs. And I think he was just an amazing person. And then the other would be a French photographer, Cartier-Bresson, who is a street photographer, and that's what I love to do outside of work and on my own time. And if there was a guy that I would point to who was one of the people that I aspired to be, it would be him.
That's fascinating. What was his name again?
Cartier-Bresson.
Cartier-Bresson. No, I'm asking because first of all, it's a French name, so I definitely don't have that in me. But Cartier-Bresson, I've got to look up his work because I know that you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you had a professor who had sort of taught you, who had learned about art in Paris and this and that, and it taught you how to see. And I think that was an opportunity where I should have pushed forward. And while we're here towards the end of it, maybe we can leave a little nugget behind. What does it mean to see when it comes to art?
So Henry Cartier-Bresson. And okay, so what does it mean to see
when it comes to art? And if that's what you implied when you had said taught me to see.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. It's just really developing an eye and seeing things in a certain way. And we'll just point at photography, which also relates to film and video, is being able to capture a moment, a decisive moment, where you can tell a story with one frame. And there was a philosopher, I forget his name, but basically he called it the studium and the punctum, where you have an image and it made it look like a normal image, but there was something in that image that just pinched you in the ass.
Yeah.
And from all the other art that we look at, we bring our own history, but it's whatever moves you as a person. I think to a certain degree, wooden cat mailboxes aren't art, but art in general. I had a moment here for a second. Yeah, I guess just developing the eye. And I'll add to that. One of the things that informs me as a creative director too is just seeing the art through the years. And sometimes the lines get blurred between advertising and art. So slick, Nike ads or TV, being able to consume all of that media and sometimes reappropriate ideas, not necessarily take them. I think it all kind of melds together. So sometimes art and design, those lines do get blurred.
I like that. And it sounds like being able to see really has this notion behind it of seeing movements that others don't see yet within stills. within still frames, within one moment, seeing more movements than maybe the normal eye has seen, and to learn to see things deeper so you can see those movements happening. It's a little meta, but I think I'm beginning to understand what you're trying to install into my brain here. And I really appreciate you mentioning those things, because
Well,
it's having me look at things and think about things differently.
sorry,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll get a little more meta. And that is that we see those things too in design. So when I'm working with my team, this might sound funny, but sometimes you have a visceral reaction to a design, or as a team, you'll look at something, and my lead designer, John, who I'm so fortunate to have, we'll look at something and like, does that work? And we'll just kind of both look at each other and say, yeah, that works, or no, for some reason it doesn't. And it's because we were both taught to see, right, through our formal training and through our through business and the work that we do with clients.
Love that. Frank, it really has been a pleasure getting to know you, brief though it was, but also getting to hear about your experiences, how you see the day to day in your business, what you believe is important, and that an entrepreneur maybe can use as a reminder for a balance in life. For all things should have balance, and overall, just a really pleasant conversation. Getting to know each other and talk about things like entrepreneurship and those who inspire us and what we aspire to do and accomplish. So thank you once again. The listener can go to mightyfinedesign.co for any information they need. And all the links for social should likely be tagged there, or you can find them on social under the same thing, Mighty Fine Design. That being said, Frank, thanks for stopping by.
You're welcome, and it was a pleasure talking to you as well. I really enjoyed your insight into what I was saying, so thank you.